My name's Phil Snyder, and several years ago I was wandering around in the field of ideas and I stumbled upon what I think was a pearl. I call it relative human efficiency. It's the idea that people can easily do anything that nature can do as long as the requirements of space, time, matter, and energy are within human capabilities. And as such, I think this idea can be used to test whether something could have happened through natural processes or whether it requires something more. Being a person of faith, I apply this to the idea of whether or not the world could have created itself, or whether in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Years ago I was just thinking about what is the reality of life and of creation and creativity and this whole idea. And I realized that if I toss a coin once, and it's a fair coin, it's not loaded, so to speak, that I'll get either a head or a tail, and half the time at least I'll get a head. But if I toss it 100 times, I'm going to be very close to 50 heads and 50 tails. But if I place this, I can either get 100 heads or 100 tails. And the point is that people can do things that nature would either never do or very, very, very rarely ever do. And so I tested this in several different ways. I have a little demonstration where we drop Scrabble tiles onto a card and try to spell the word more, and to drop it so that they are aligned with the card has less than one chance in 100 trillion of being successful. But I've shown this to well over 100 people, and every one of them has gotten it right 1 out of 1. So I tell them they're more than 100 trillion times better than chance. Hey guys, I got something I want to show you here. Did you realize that you're more than 100 trillion times better?
No, didn't realize that.
Probably saying better than what?
Yeah.
Well, let me show you. I got this card there, and I've got these 4 Scrabble tiles. You take those, just shake them up and drop them on there. They didn't line up, did they?
No, they didn't.
No, they didn't spell anything either much. That might have spelled me, but that's upside down.
Yeah.
Try it again, just see if they line up. They're not going to line up. Let me get this one out of the way. You only got
2 of them
2.
up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Carter, you take those and just turn them any way you need to and set them right on there and have them line up. Get them nice and even. Perfect. I haven't had anybody that's not been able to do that. Your chances of dropping those on there and having them all line up is 1 chance in about 155 trillion. It's got, either you guys into math?
A little bit.
Yeah. On the other side here, it shows how I calculated that. You can realize if you had probability that if you drop those, they're either going to be up or down. So you got 1 chance in 16 of all of them being. That's
Wow.
2 to the 4th power, and then the odds of them. I assumed that they would fall into a 7x7 grid and all that. So that was one way it was established. I tried other ways. I have a picture that shows 500 pennies, all heads up. Now your chances of dropping those is on the order of 3.27 times 10 to the 150th power. Now that's a number that very few people could even appreciate, but it's just picture 3 with 150 zeros after it. A number so big that it can't be represented by anything in the physical world. And yet, a person can place those that way 1 time out of 1. my takeaway from this, or my conclusion is that we can look at things that are supposed to have happened through natural processes, and if a person can do it, and if it's of a small enough scale that a person should be able to do it, then if they can, then it could well have happened by natural processes. And if they can't, then this is almost an infallible proof that it didn't happen through natural processes. Some folks think that this is related to the idea of intelligent design, but it really takes things a step further. I came upon this idea after discussing with a person who purported to be an atheist, and said that the world just created itself, and that bothered me, and I thought about, what's the evidence? And I came upon this idea. Now I've been looking diligently for at least 6 or 7 years now, trying to see if anybody else has had the same idea, and I have not found it elsewhere. So I'm claiming, for the time being at least, until somebody proves me different, I'm claiming that this is an original Phil Snyder idea. And I kind of compare this, I live in Hicksville, Ohio, and I sometimes call myself the village idiot, which reminds me of one of my favorite jokes, where the village idiot goes into the alchemist's laboratory and he says, "Duh, what you doing?" And the alchemist says, "I am creating the universal solvent. It will dissolve everything." And the village idiot says, "Duh, what you going to keep it in?" And this idea, although it doesn't make as good of a joke, when somebody says that the universe created itself, or that life was created through natural processes, I say, "Duh, why can't we do it?" And I've shown in many ways and with many logical evidences that humans should be able to do anything that a natural process can do, as long as the qualifications that I've mentioned apply. One of the possible objections to my demonstrations of relative human efficiency is that my examples are all man-made, the coins and the Scrabble tiles and all. But I have a little example here of something that could occur naturally, but happens a lot more efficiently through human effort. I've got this box of rocks, and every one of these rocks in here, there's 70 of them all together, and they all weigh 40 grams. Now we did a little sampling, a little calculation, and determined that if the entire world were piled a mile high with rocks of the same distribution that you see in the background here, that there'd still be less than 100 trillion to 1 chance that there would be 70 rocks like there is in this box, all of which weigh 40 grams. Just one more example of how human effort is so much more efficient at generating specific goals than what nature is. In fact, I'm inclined to think that there's no place else in the universe where there's this many 40-gram rocks all in one place. So you've seen something that's unique in the universe. The highest motivation, I would have to say, was a quest for truth. But being a person of faith, I really wanted to determine whether or not science had strong evidence that the world did create itself, and if so, then there's no need for a God. But beyond that, I just wanted to assure myself that I had a reasonable and logical perspective on the world around me. Usually, the people with whom I share this would either have already been believers and would be either equipped with an extra tool that they could share with others, or they would be people who were at a point where their doubt was such that we wanted to just open a door rather than try to send them through it, so to speak. And that's typically been the result of this. I see three different groups of people that I like to share with. And one is believers who want a better perspective on the world than what the science community typically will give them. And so that would be one group. Another group would be young people who are forming a worldview and need to have, or really we would like to provide for them a realistic view of how things are, and a realistic appreciation for what it means for a person to be created in God's image. One of the primary things that I think relates to that particular truth is that when you look around and try to see what is creative, the truly creative force in the world is human intelligence. If you look for things that didn't exist 50 years ago that are useful and that are complicated and that make our lives better or make our planet better, then invariably you will find that they were the result of human effort. I look around the room here and I see some lights, and I see a backpack, and I see a whiteboard there to write on and all that, and a video screen. And many of those things didn't exist 50 years ago, and certainly not 100 years ago. They all make our lives better, and they all are a result of human effort. So creativity is a human aspect, and to me, relative human efficiency, the principle that we can do what nature can do, only we can do it so much better and so much more efficiently. That is just one more evidence of the fact that creativity requires intelligence. Relative human efficiency not only is something that can be demonstrated and can be shown, it's not only something that is observed, but it's also something that makes a very sound logical argument. Of course, the first argument is that I can demonstrate any number of ways that human effort is more efficient than natural forces. But nobody that I've talked to, and nobody that I've read, or nobody in no way that I have thought of, can it be shown that nature can do something on a relatively small scale. Nature can't do anything that people can't do more readily. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, we do things better than nature, and nature does not do things as well as we do. But beyond that, nature can't learn from its mistakes, but people can. And people can catalog small increments of success. If I wanted to build a car, for instance, I could figure out how to make fasteners, I could figure out how to make pistons, how to make carburetors. I don't have to do this in a proper order for assembly. I can do one at one time and record how it's done, and then go to something else and figure out how that's done. And when I've figured all of the elements of it, then I can assemble it. Whereas nature, if nature is going to create an assembly of some sort, like a living cell, it has to do things in the proper order. It can't figure out how to make DNA one time and how to make the protoplasm or the membrane that goes around it at some other remote time, they have to all be assembled and available at the same time. People, on the other hand, like I say, configure these individually and then at a certain time assemble them all after they're ready. That's something. Nature, when it's figuring something, creating something, if it comes to a fatal flaw, that's a dead end. If people come to a fatal flaw, they know what they've done so far. A good scientist will keep a notebook, and he'll have figured out how he got to that point. And once he has an idea of how to go the step beyond, then he can do that. The things that are dead ends to nature are just bumps in the road, so to speak, to human effort. So people can identify principles. You can say a principle is that if life elements are above a certain temperature or below a certain temperature, they will not thrive. But nature doesn't know this. Nature is blind, and it's just the circumstances have to be right, whereas people can adjust the circumstances in order to achieve a certain goal. So for these logical reasons, I'm saying that relative human efficiency, I'm claiming, is as true as 2 + 2 = 4. Because there are so many reasons why humans can do things that nature can't, and there's no reason why nature can do any small-scale event that people can't. Sort of like Moses saying, hey, why me? You know, I don't really have any credentials in the field. I'm not a philosopher. The only professional credentials I have are in the area of rotary vane air motor design, which probably 95% of the people I talk to wouldn't even know what that is, much less why it would mean anything. But anyway, I was getting ready to marry this lady that I was in love with, and she says, we need to be going to church. Didn't want to be married in front of a justice of peace or anything. We never really talked about that. We just assumed that we needed to have a church. And so we traded off. I had a little bit of a background with a Methodist church, and it never really took. She went to a more fundamental church, and after about 3 Sundays, we ended up at her church the whole time. And they kept saying things that I said, if this is true, I need to change my mind about some things. And so I wrestled with that for quite a while. And finally she says, I'm going to publicly declare my faith. I don't care if you do or not, I'm going to do it. And I couldn't let a woman show me up. So I said, I'm going to do the same thing. And I really, at the time, tried to seek. I've always been an evidence-based person. I always look for the reasons why things happen. When I was a kid, I remember taking my bicycle apart and putting it back together probably a dozen times or more, because I wanted to not only know how it worked, but I wanted to know how to make it work better. And that's typical of the type of person I was. I always wanted to know the why, so I wanted to know, why should I believe? And so I read rather extensively, both in the scriptures and in. One of my favorite authors was C.S. Lewis, and one of the favorite, several of the books that he wrote were very, very good. And I remember reading Mere Christianity, which was a very good outline of how what the key issues of the Christian faith would be, and I came to a point in time, and I still remember where I was, and I said, that life has to be anchored on something. Some people anchor it on their own intelligence or on what somebody else says or whatever, and I said, I'm going to anchor my life on Christ. And that was a turning point, so to speak, and never turned back.